the Five Rings Podcast, Road to Tokyo on the Sports Podcasting Network. Your weekly fix leading up to the 2020 Olympic Games with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. Follow us and listen to us live on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network for more content.
Good day, good night, and welcome to the Five Rings Podcast, Road to Tokyo. No date anymore. Joining us live on the line to talk about Canada's decision to not send any athlete to the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games if they are not postponed by a year. Evan Dunfee, 2019 World Championship medalist in the race walk 50 kilometer. A pleasure to have Evan on the show once again. Evan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
We want to start the show, Evan, by asking you, how is that news? How did it was received by you last night?
Yeah, I found out same time everyone else found out. We were not privy to any prior information. I know COC was working really hard right up until late last night when they made the decision, and read the press release. And immediately my first reaction was one of great pride that this is the team I get to compete for and represent. And it was a really bold decision. I know it wasn't made lightly, and I 100% support them in it, and I think it's the right call.
Well, Evan, that was going to be my next question. So let's expand a little bit on that. What is it in particular, other than the obvious health safety reasons, that makes you so proud about this decision?
Yesterday morning, the IOC came out and sort of said, "Hey, look, we're tabling all ideas. Everything's out on the table. We're going to look at things, and just give us 4 weeks to make this decision." And I get it; it's a really tough decision. I mean, moving the mountain that is the Olympic Games, I don't think any athlete can begin to really understand just how much goes into that and what that must look like. But 4 weeks just wasn't going to cut it. I mean, athletes needed to know whether they had to go out and train today. And I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky in my situation where I'm still able to train mostly as normal. I'm still allowed outside and walking on the streets by myself, and can still do a lot of what I need to do. But so many athletes had their entire training infrastructure shut down on them, and we're getting to the point where they were putting themselves at risk, and then as an extension of that, their friends, their family, and their communities at risk, just to try and train and maintain some sort of fitness in the uncertainty of whether the thing's going to happen or not. So for the COC to step forward and to say, no, we're taking this out of the athlete's hands. It was a bold move, and what's made me even prouder today is seeing just the overwhelming percentage of Canadian athletes who stand by and agree with the decision, and it's been pretty neat to see.
We heard Dick Pound widely quoted today of suggesting that the Olympics would in fact be postponed to 2021. Now, I don't know how much Dick Pound speaks for the IOC as a whole. Certainly he is a strong voice there, but we don't know whether it's the general consensus across the world yet. How confident are you that the IOC will in fact do the right thing here and postpone these games until 2021?
I gotta say, 3 weeks ago, I was definitely one of the people saying, "Oh, there's no way they won't move the Olympics. It'll happen in July." And I was so very wrong. First to admit that, but I think yesterday some of the stuff the IOC put out, whether it was the Thomas Bach open letter to the athletes or the press release from the executive board meeting, it really strongly hinted at postponement being the likeliest scenario at this point in time. Why they couldn't come out and say that, or whether there's stuff that who knows, whether it could be insurance stuff, it could be just getting the ducks in a row, who knows. But with COC, with the Canadian Olympic Committee, and now you have the following on from the Australians, and you have other countries that their own individual sporting federations, USA Track and Field, USA Swimming were the first to really come out and take a stand and recommend the Olympics get pushed back. World Athletics, Sebastian Coe came out and said, we'll tailor our schedule for a 2021 Olympics. Like, don't worry about us. Like, we can move our world championships. Eugene can happen in 2022. Like, you keep that in mind, like urging the IOC to postpone it. So, I think there's a groundswell now of athletes and federations calling for postponement. It seems to be the only viable option left.
Many athletes like yourself, I'm just thinking here, Damian Warner, Lolo Jones, just a few were really vocal over the last couple of days on social media about Tokyo 2020, the postponement, I'm thinking. But it's not the first time that Tokyo Organizing Committee is under scrutiny over the last year or so. Of course, there's the moving of the event of the race walk, your event from Tokyo to Sapporo. There's a lot of things that are going to be in flux also for the future. If you had, I don't want to put you in trouble, so I'm not going to go really deep in this, but if you had to give a grade to the Tokyo Organizing Committee as of right now, would that grade be passing or failing?
Oh, yeah. The Tokyo Organizing Committee is doing a great job. That decision to move the race walks and the marathon events from Tokyo to Sapporo was not their decision. I mean, that was made unilaterally without discussion by the IOC in a kind of reactionary move from the World Championships that were in Doha. And to their credit, the Tokyo Organizing Committee, they pushed back and they said, no, we don't think this is the right decision. And ultimately, the IOC kind of, stiff arm of the law and kind of laid their fist down and said, no, this is happening. You don't really have a choice, and kind of forced World Athletics and the Organizing Committee to get on board with it. But, give full credit to the Organizing Committee. I mean, they're tasked with such an impossible thing right now. And, just looking at some of the logistics involved, you have the Olympic Village that's going to be condos that people are going to be moving into in 2021. So, I can't imagine, the work that must be going on now to get the pieces moving to possibly delay the games. But, full credit, full commendation to the Organizing Committee for doing what they're doing.
As an athlete, you mentioned the open letter of Thomas Bach to the athlete that was supposed to publish yesterday. Does a letter like this have weight? When you're an athlete, you're in a weird time where, like, athletes like yourself were training, but some of them are, like, you can't. They were self-isolation, or team sports are not able to happen right now, even in training. Does a letter like this help? Does it reassure? Does it pose more question? I'm wondering if a person in charge like Thomas Bach, either showing a leadership or a lack of leadership, does it have weight? Does it trickle down to the confidence of the athlete?
I think right now globally, our standard for leadership is sadly quite low. And even at that, I don't know if Thomas Bach makes the cut. It wasn't that long ago that he was telling athletes to continue on as normal and to train as best they can. And, that is not acceptable. He hasn't come out and made any attempt at remorse for that comment, and the complete lack of understanding of what situation that put on the athletes and what pressure that put the athletes on to risk their health and their family's health and their friends' health. It was utterly disrespectful. And again, in that same situation, Hayley Wickenheiser, Canadian, one of the first people to speak up and call it what it was. And we have so much as Canadians to be proud of on our end here with just the global leadership role that we've taken. It makes me really proud to be Canadian.
Evan, as an Olympian, I imagine you kind of think in 4-year terms, and now the possibility of this being a 5-year cycle, that has to throw a wrench into things. And I'm wondering how difficult it will be for athletes to adjust to an extra year, if in fact that is what has to happen.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to speak for all athletes, but that's certainly going to be the case for some athletes. There's going to be some athletes who are going to retire after 2020, who this might have been getting to 2020 was putting life on hold, maybe stretching that out as far as it possibly could, and 2021 is just a step too far. I think there will be cases like that. I think some athletes will be faced with really tough decisions. Personally, I'm in a position where I got nothing else going on in my life I'm in this for the long haul, and I approach every year. Yeah, you always sort of look at the Olympic cycle in 4 years, and but in track and field, pretty much every year we have an opportunity to line up against the best in the world and compete, whether that's the World Championships, whether it's the Olympic Games. I just personally, I love that opportunity to challenge myself against the best, and you can call it whatever you want. For me, what matters more than the title is the opportunity just to test myself against those guys. And the Olympics obviously carry a little bit more weight, and they're more prestigious, and they're what 9-year-old Evan dreamed of competing at. But as I've evolved and grown through sports, so much of who I am now focuses on how good do I think I can be, and let's work towards that. And so my motivation, even with there nothing being on the competition calendar this year, my motivation is still pretty high. I still want to get out there and train and just see how good I can be.
I haven't had a chance to congratulate you on the World Championship medal. That was certainly great to see when it happened at Doha. Tell us a bit about that and what you felt allowed you to be so successful on the day.
Yeah, Doha was a great race. I mean, looking back over, Rio Olympics, finishing 4th place in the 50K race walk there, coming so close to that medal, and then believing, from that point on, believing that, okay, it's medal or bust. It's medal or bust. I'm up there. I'm in that echelon. Like every race, I need to be going after that medal. And going into 2017 and 2018 at our championships, I just wasn't there. I wasn't prepared to be top 3 in the world, and I kind of put myself in these positions that I was stretching myself a little thin. I was blowing up in races, and I was just really frustrated. I mean, the 50K is such a long way. It's a marathon plus 8 more K, and I was just really sick of getting beat by the distance more than anything. So my goals coming into Doha for the first time really in a couple of years weren't, hey, I want to stand on that podium. My goal was, I want to beat this stupid distance. I want to conquer, I want to prove to myself heading into the Olympic year that I can still conquer 50 kilometers. And I knew that if I did that, I had a good chance of finishing top 8. And I knew that the conditions were going to be absolutely ungodly with the heat and the humidity, and racing at 11:30 at night and finishing at 3:30 in the morning. And, I more than anything, I just wanted to conquer that distance. And I went into that race and just finished, I think halfway through the race, I was still back in like maybe 15th or 16th, and just worked my way through the field. And my last kilometer was the fastest kilometer I've ever walked in a 50K, in any of my 50K races ever, in a race where people were dying, I made up about 3 minutes and 20 seconds in the last 5 kilometers on the eventual winner. And so just for me, that more than the medal, it was like, okay, sweet. I've beaten the distance. I've conquered 50K again, and just had that confidence that, I could do the same thing, come Tokyo, whenever that happens now.
Tokyo 2020, 20-something. That's what we're going to call
20-something, yeah.
Hashtag Tokyo 20-something. Evan Dunfee, we thank you very much for your time today. And before we let you go, I know it's happening quickly. The decision was yesterday by the COC, and we're seeing countries like Australia, Poland, and others joining the movement that Canada started and forcing the hand of the IOC to announce a postponement very soon. But if postponement if it goes to 2021, there's almost a scientific aspect to this, because we're going to learn if the 4-year thing changes, if you can adapt in 1 year to a different date for an event. As a long distance and endurance type of athlete, this might not necessarily injure you as much as necessarily a sprint type of athlete. And I think it's fascinating to look at the physiological response of the body for athletes like yourself, or for a different type of athlete, for marathon versus sprint athlete, to see how they can acclimate their body to a new date, to a new year. And how do you envision this possible year for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I love the throw whatever you got at me. One of the reasons I loved Doha was because it was stupid hot, it was humid, it was a race in the middle of the night that we've never done before. All that uncertainty. I I know standing on the start line that I'm not the most physiologically gifted athlete. I don't have, the most genetically enhanced VO2 max and all these things. And I stand on the start line confident that I've done all those little things right, that I'm ready for that moment on that day to rise to the occasion. And anything else that throws a wrench in things gives me more confidence that I can adapt and I can, follow sports science to really help guide me. And that was one of the reasons I was still looking forward to competing in Tokyo and not in Sapporo, because I wanted it to be hotter. I wanted it to be more humid, because I knew that was going to make it a challenge for those guys who are more gifted than me. So, if we can see this as an opportunity, if we as Canadians can rally behind this, this moment of us being the first and being the global leaders, and really like take that to heart and build from that and use it as sort of a spark, I think we could see it as a huge benefit to Canadian athletes in 2021 or 2022 or whenever the Olympics happen. Having that mindset of like, yes, we're going to rise to the occasion. The Canadian Olympic Committee is going with postpone today, conquer tomorrow. And I think if we rally behind that, it's going to give us an advantage, because there's going to be some athletes who will wilt, who will not be able to rise to that occasion because that change is just too big. It will weigh heavily on their mind. And I think more than the physical aspects, I think some athletes are going to benefit from some time off right now. I think we, as athletes, we do tend to think more is better, more is better, more is better. And it'll be interesting to see how many athletes come out the other side of this kind of unintended break, being like, oh, wow, my body feels really good. But more than the physical aspect is the mental aspect. And I think that's something that we have greater control over, is just framing this positively and looking at it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle.
Evan Dunfee, thank you very much for your time today. It's always a pleasure to talk sports with you, to talk race walking, and I hope we get the chance to do so again in the very near future. We want to wish you all the best, whatever may happen in the next few months, and we also want to wish you stay safe. A happy self-isolation.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure coming on, and yeah, always happy to come back. So thank you guys so much.
We'll take a short break.
Cheers.
And be right back on the Five Rings Podcast. And we're back on the Five Rings Podcast. Kevin Laramie joined by Duane Rollins. As always, Duane, it's always a pleasure to talk to Evan Dunfee. We want to thank Evan for his openness, his time, his availability. This is short term because it happened yesterday. Things happening fast, and Evan took the time today to talk to us.
It shouldn't be the job of an Olympian to calm me down, but thank you, Evan. That's what you did. You calmed me down. You made me feel better about the situation. So there you go.
You're right. It's quite enjoyable.
He reminds me a little bit of, I'm going to pull a real big name from Canadian Olympic history out here. He reminds me of a male version of Clara Hughes. Just that determination and that sort of intellect in terms of going after the sport. There's something about they both were like athletes that push through pain, right?
There's something about endurance athlete. There's something about that. That's why I love cycling, right? That's why cycling to me is my endurance sport. There's nothing that, physiologically speaking, differentiate really the number 1 to number 5, right? The top cyclist or race walker. It's about between the years. It's about that pushing through that pain barrier. You're absolutely right. And it is a pain barrier having the games postponed, if it is the case. Or if it's not postponed, missing an entire cycle for a Canadian athlete. Because that's what we're looking at. If the International Olympic Committee does not postpone the game, which is very unlikely at this moment. We all anticipate the news to drop at any moment. Apparently, it was talked about and a decision has been taken. Dick Pound, former vice president of the International Olympic Committee and former president and founder of the World Anti-Doping Agency, Montreal, of course, mentioned to USA Today earlier today on Monday, the decision is taken and that it will be postponed till 2021. But if it's not, the decision by the Canadian Olympic Committee is to forego an entire cycle if it's not postponed. So it's not a light decision. It was a bold one. It was the first country to do so, and we've seen other country join the dance since then, and there's a lot of country in the queue for the same dance.
Look, we put all our chips in. It was poker play, right?
Yeah,
Let's
it was.
just make sure the IOC does the right thing here, and that's exactly what the COC has done here. They've decided to put all the chips on the table and say, look, we're not going if you decide to do this in 2020 because these games will be illegitimate at that point. And although Canada so far is the strongest statement, there are much better statements there. Evan mentioned USA Swimming and track and field. Folks,
Yeah.
USA Swimming and track and field pull out of the Olympics. It's not an Olympics anymore.
It's done.
It's
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's an athletic competition that happens to have 5 rings attached to it, but no.
It doesn't determine any best of anything. And even without Canada. Like Canada is, we were talking about this before this morning after our Soccer Today show. Canada is a notable country in the world of Olympics. It's a top 10 for sure, important country to the movement. And with this, and with other decisions taken over the years, we're showing the leadership that this country can take on a global level. And there is a public health aspect to this. The government was involved in this decision with the Canadian Olympic Committee. It has not been taken lightly. And the athletes are really happy about it. If we go to a B210 founder, Dominique Gauthier, former acrobatic ski athlete, medalist for Canada, Duane, in the late 90s, early 2000s. He founded, of course, B210. His wife is Jennifer Heil. They had a petition going to ask the Canadian Olympic Committee to ask Tokyo to postpone. And there's a lot of companies around the world, sponsors, that were working behind the scenes on same type of press releases or statements or communiques to the IOC to ask for a postponement. So it's a lot of voices, but Canada decided to go one step further. Like, not only did they didn't just do a press release with a letterhead, they went one step further by, like you say, calling the bluff, going all in. Now, hopefully, the right things happen by the IOC, and they show leadership. I was careful the way I asked the question to Evan Dunfee. I do not want him in trouble. But we've seen people give leadership. We've seen Shinzo Abe become a bit almost the puppet. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, was almost a puppet of Thomas Bach over the last couple of weeks. He was stern and adamant that we're not postponing. That message changed last week. And I feel Japan has a lot to do to change that message with the pressure they did put on the IOC. But also, I think it's about time we mention it. The IOC is not willing to take decisions. It's not the first time that we've seen a delay, wait till the possible, and then you just take the decision that everybody else put you in a position to not take, basically. The IOC is in a lack of leadership. It's clear now. And hopefully after all this, it's time that people act on it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I've said several times over the past couple of weeks that I am going to give a little bit of a pass to the reluctance to pull the plug here, but it has been clear for the past week at least that this is the action that needed to happen. When UEFA is pulling the plug on Euro 2020, at that point, the IOC should have followed suit immediately, because those are not quite equal, but it's the next biggest competition that was going to take place over. It's the third or fourth biggest competition in the world. Yeah. Euros likely in terms of exposure in that, and it pulled it pretty quick and pretty decisively. And if they can do that, and there's a lot of logistics at play there, maybe not as close to the Summer Olympics, which is another level, but it certainly was a sign that they should make the next move quickly. Look, the question I asked Evan about what this extra year means, I think this is something that all of us that believe in Olympians and the Olympic movement need to keep in mind, because if we can help our athletes, if we can help athletes anywhere in whatever country we are, whether that be through government pressure to give them a little more funding, through pressuring sponsors to extend that sponsorship through another year, through direct funding, there are options out there to do that. We need to do that, because this is going to be a very difficult decision for a lot of people, more difficult than we would think, because they've geared their life around 4-year cycles. There are people that would have, as Evan said, that were set to retire at the end of this year. I'm sure there are female athletes that were set to start a family at the end of this 4 years. There are lots of situations like that out there that are going to have to they're either going to have to give up their Olympic dream, or they're going to have to postpone their life another year.
Some people were starting real jobs, right? Some athletes are done their cycle and they're going to start their real job with their sponsor that are offering him a role for the rest of their post-career. So there's a lot of things. You're absolutely right. And Evan he says he's lucky to be in this situation, and some are not going to be, and it is going to be the same case. And you talk about sponsors. Some sponsors are not going to be able to survive. Some sponsors are going to go bankrupt because of this, because of COVID-19 and all its ramification. And maybe some of the sponsors won't be there for next year. Maybe the COC, because of governmental cuts that will need to happen because of the hospital charges, of whatever the case may be. Things are going to be really different next year. And you're right. And the one phrase that Evan did mention maybe needs to be put on a shirt, and the profit needs to be kept for the athlete, and that would be postpone today, conquer tomorrow. Hashtag postpone today, conquer tomorrow, Canada. Let's get some money for our athletes.
And look, as I've said a great deal on Soccer Today, I believe very strongly that we need to get back to a level of normalcy as soon as we can, and when we're through the weeds here, right? And I think this 2021 Summer Olympics, and maybe you put them in the spring, you could bump them up a little bit that way. I don't think it has to be necessarily 12 months if we see that we're coming out of it sooner, but you have to make a decision soon. If you can have that, it is a potential for the world to have a real great celebration at the end of it. We're through it, and now here we've come in and we're still alive. And look, there's going to be a lot of complications, and maybe there won't be as much money behind it. Maybe the times might be slower, right? Mm-hmm. Because they can't train as well as they could over the last year. That's fine. The Olympics are about higher, faster, stronger, but they're also just about the spirit of bringing the world together to drive themselves to personal best, to the best that they can perform under the circumstances that they're provided. So I think it's important to get this going back again.
Could be a heck of a party in 2021. Or if you want to go the other side of the best case scenario, well, the survivors are going to have a great party also. Like, we made it, guys. We only 10% of us are left, but we made it through. I'm exaggerating here. It's, of course, to illustrate the point. But yeah, it could be a great party next year.
Yeah, look, and it's a bummer. Like, as I said on Soccer Today, I felt like a kick in the gut, but I knew it was coming, and the athletes had to know deep down it was coming. So to give them a level of certainty out of this, then that's for the best. And worst case scenario here is that the IOC decides to push on against the resistance of these countries like Canada, like the associations out there, and they have this half-assed games at the end of it. We'll have a decision to make of how serious we want to take them at that point. But I think we all understand, just like no one talks, with notable exceptions, about the 80 or 84 games. No one talks about them being the best ever because of the circumstances around that. It's just the LC, they may be dumb, but they're not stupid, is what I'm kind of saying here. They're going to make the move now because they're being forced into. They were probably going to. Now, with moves like this, they will be forced to make that decision regardless, because the games will be illegitimized. And, as we said on Soccer Today, the women's soccer tournament lost 2 of its top seeds in the course of 12 hours. How can you possibly say it's a worthwhile tournament at that point?
It's not. And I guess you're right. We're going to see that happen. Yeah. It's going to continue to fall like dominoes. We'll have countries and federations Olympic committees dropping out of the games until Tokyo decides, and the April is too far. They said yesterday, we'll make a decision in 4 weeks. That's way too far, though. It's going to happen in the next couple of days. Yeah,
and I think that the other thing the COC was doing with this was sort of putting a blast over the bow of the bigger nations, the biggest nations. I mean, Canada is, I call them a middle power, right? I mean, we're a middle power in the world. We're probably a middle power in the Olympic movement, too. So not insignificant, but not the U.S., not China, not Russia. Russia is a different story.
We're finishing the show on Russia because I got a good one for you on Russia. Of course, Russia agrees with the IOC that you have to do the Olympics in.
Well, they're still playing their own sports.
Russia doesn't have any COVID-19 apparently, but there's a very, very big pneumonia happening this year in Russia apparently. So I guess tomato.
Yeah, the KHL playoffs are starting back up next week, so. Figure that one out, guys. But it is. I'm coming around with Evan. It was a very daring and great move that Canada and the COC made. They showed leadership. And I don't want to get political here, but I've been quite happy that my leaders are speaking at this time and not leaders from elsewhere. We'll leave it at that because there has been a greater degree of leadership shown that I feel anyway. And this is just another example of it. This is a tough time. And we're missing all of this, Kevin. I'm watching old World Championships right now.
Okay.
Not like 2019 World Championships.
If you can see my phone, Duane texted, like I was napping this afternoon, and Duane texted me a picture of his laptop or something. It's artistic swimming, I guess it's called now. And I was like, okay, sure. If that answers your Olympic hitch, it's great.
Yeah, and quick for our listeners, here is a little hint. If you type in a sport that's in the Olympics and World Cup or World Championships, often, not always, but often, you will find an entire replay of the World Championships or the World Cup event that you find. And I'm guessing that even me, even a geek like me, doesn't watch every World Cup out there, right? So you can watch stuff as if it's live again.
Because you don't know. Who knows who won in 2017, the European game in Baku? You know, you could watch that too. Netball, I remember. That's what I remember from Baku 2017. Anyways, if there's any tech-savvy people out there, I am still playing my two Olympic games, my two of the best Xbox video games ever made, London 2012 and, of course, Vancouver 2010. And I'm trying to find a way to play. I don't think I'll be able to play live these games on streaming because it's so old and there's no way to do this in a way that I don't have a game capture card. But I think I'm going to try to record at least some of my gameplay and then do some commentating for you all and maybe publish this on the Five Rings podcast. Maybe we could have some fun with video games until next time we have real things to talk about here on the Five Rings podcast. We're talking about like actual game box score type of thing. But no, it's going to be a rougher year than anticipated. One thing though that I'm happy with, Duane, and let's finish on this, for the athletes themselves, one of the worst thing is doubt. It's not knowing. And the entire country is going through a difficult time right now, just facing this coronavirus COVID-19 situation. And the doubt, the not knowing if you're needing to train, if you can train, if you'll be able to compete or not, that lack of knowledge, that uncertainty is not good for anyone's mental health. And at least now the athletes know where they stand, they know where it's going, and they can just focus on taking care of their family for the next 4 months, and then we'll see.
Yeah, look, I'm going to offer you a prediction. By the time we do we'll be doing special shows all week as news breaks, if the IOC does come through. But then by the time our next regular scheduled Five Rings is, which would, well, this is ahead of schedule anyway, but next week is what I'm saying. I suspect the IOC will have made the official announcement by that point, because I expect in the next 2 or 3 days that we're going to have a few other countries come out, and once the U.S. pulls the plug, at that point, game over, right? So that I suspect we'll have an announcement by next week, and that's good. Speaking of video games, my last thought of the day is if anyone has the old stand-up arcade game, Track and Field, and could ship it to my address, that's how I'll pass the time. Can someone send me the arcade game, Track and Field, so I can bash those buttons?
Do you remember the Nintendo? Yeah, of course you remember Nintendo, the NES, right? The Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah. But you had something you could run on. Like there was like a mat that was like blue dots and red dots, and I used to run on it, and you could play Track and Field. The same game that was in the video, like an arcade, was in Nintendo. And I played that game, like the sound that you hear at the beginning of this game is coming from Track and Field. And I used to play and run on that mat like no one. I don't think my downstairs neighbors like me really much, but I was running on that thing like there was no tomorrow.
I don't think I need to have a video game tell me that my 15.9 second 100 meter is not that good. I think I know that instinctively. I'd rather have a faster time appear on the screen.
Yeah, but on that note, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramie, and this show at at Five Rings Podcast, like it says right here down the screen. Thank you to Evan Dunfee for his time today. Evan Dunfee, the best Canadian ever race walker in the history of the sports in this country, an amazing athlete, an amazing person, fighting for what he believes in for years. And I hope, Duane, that one day he's elected on the Athletes Council, because he would be a great seat on that council.
If that's what he wants, for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, there's a great history of Canadian athletes that speak up. Becky Scott, Evan Dunphy's the newest example of that.
And on that note, as always, we'll say goodbye until next time. Be safe. Enjoy your isolation if you can. Stay positive. and wash your hands.